Managing the agility, reliability, and security of a platform is hard in its own right. Add on the complexity of being in the federal sector. Dan Loomis, product manager at VMware, and Matt Gehring, platform engineer at Scientific Research Corporation, will discuss whether you can really have it all in the federal sector. Take it away.
Hi, all. Thanks for joining our talk today. My name is Dan Loomis. I'm a product manager with VMware, and I'm joined here by Matt Gehring, who is a platform engineer with SRC. So, hey, say hi, Matt. So today we're here to talk about cloud platforms, and specifically, can you have platform agility, reliability with proper security in the federal sector? We think you can, but we'd like to talk about some of the unique challenges. So before we get into the details, I'd like to introduce you to who we are and who we support. So Matt and I are part of the Tachyon platform team, a branded platform as a service product and engineering team that supports the Section 31 software factory. And Section 31 falls under something called a program called Kobayashi Maru. So Kobayashi Maru's mission is to, quote, modernize the United States Air and Space Forces with new agile solutions for the warfighters of today and the future, end quote. So what the heck does that mean? At the Section 31 application teams, our customers primarily develops cloud native greenfield applications that deliver capabilities to support something called the Space Tasking Cycle. We call it the STC at the Combined Space Operations Center, or the CSPOC, at Vandenberg Air Force Base. So the Space Tasking Cycle covers everything from strategy, planning, tasking, and support functions for missions that track and take actions with our various space assets. All this is performed in conjunction with our Five Eyes coalition partners. And those partners include, of course, the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. So we're a relatively small and scrappy program with about 7 application teams. Those teams are developing roughly 9 or 10 applications and at least 30 developers, but the program is rapidly growing. And the apps that they support, by the way, are used by thousands of users, again, primarily at the CSPOC. So again, I just want to say again that the Tachyon team is a branded platform team that does care and feeding for a Cloud Foundry-based platform as a service that supports these applications. And by the way, we also have a partner team on our program that also drives our K8s or Kubernetes roadmap, which is deployed onto TKGI on the same set of foundations. So, and they'll be available to answer questions in the Q&A breakout at the end of this talk. If you haven't so already, I encourage you to join some of these other talks represented by Kobayashi Maru. Driveway to Highway, which I believe is tomorrow, will cover the KM infrastructure as a service offering. And I believe the talk has already happened, but you could probably listen to a recording later, is Saving the DoD 800 million, which talks about our portfolio team and how they identify and drive new product offerings within KM. All right, so all that being said, let's talk about our team, Tachyon. So we're a distributed team with home offices clear across the country. From west to east, we're in California, Colorado, North Carolina, which is where I am, and New York State. So again, we're a cross-functional team that covers everything soup to nuts, from product management, engineering, as well as day 2 operations. So initially, as an ongoing practice, we originally planned to physically co-locate and pair out of the San Diego office each week, with remote team members like myself flying out of our home bases on Monday mornings, flying out to California, and then working together side by side, and then flying back out on Thursday night, and then pairing on Friday remotely. And again, we believe that XP style, like pairing side by side, is the best way to deliver, plan, and really teach each other about all the software that we build. That, of course, was disrupted by COVID. So we've all been working remotely out of our home bases. including the operations team, which continues to have to work out of a secure facility. And then Matt here is going to talk about that a little bit later. So that's the context of our team and who we support. So now I'm going to toss it over to Matt here, who'll go over the rest of the presentation. So Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. So we've been talking about Section 31 as a software factory, stood up to deliver modern applications to end users quickly with the flexibility to change our approach as the user's needs demand it. This desire for agility and reliability creates conflict with the other core objective of building software for the Space Force, which is information security. Because our apps have a direct role in our national defense, our security posture must be rock solid and unflinching. To an outsider, this rigorous approach to cybersecurity might seem overbearing, stifling innovation. Section 31, however, sees it as an opportunity to transform a slow, unoptimized system into a lean and agile powerhouse, delivering applications subject to the most stringent security standards in the world. Let's talk next about the product that we provide. So Tachyon's product is a platform as a service called TAS, the Tanzu Application Service, part of the Pivotal Cloud Foundry. We have 6 non-production and production Cloud Foundry foundations deployed to both unclassified and classified networks, all of which have product and version parity so that our developers have a similar experience across infrastructures and security enclaves. The services you see here reflect a typical tech stack that our software teams use to build their applications. Getting all of these products stigged and approved for production in classified networks can take months in a typical federal program. But once this baseline is accredited, it's much faster to add additional capabilities as they emerge. A good example of this is MinIO. We were able to get this stood up in production in just a few weeks. Again, mainly due to Cloud Foundry already being approved as a trusted, supported baseline. Finally, we were able to use our existing automation to stand up an end-to-end IL4 compliant development environment in Azure Government Cloud in weeks, something that is exceedingly rare in the federal sector. Let's talk now about how a platform team like ours works like a typical software development team. So our customer, the Section 31 application teams, are used to agile and extreme programming principles. Infrastructure teams historically are not, but since we're part of the larger software factory, we were forced to adapt. Our product management team, a pair of individuals, focuses on building the most valuable product possible for our customers. Our outcome-based roadmap is driven through a customer-centric, user-centered design approach. The rest of our ceremonies are performed weekly with iteration planning on Mondays, daily stand-ups, pairing, and story acceptance, culminating with a team retrospective on Thursdays. Friday is a regular day off for some team members, which is typical on the government side, something we've had to adapt to by being more focused on who's working where and what stories we have teed up for that week. Test-driven development, also an extreme programming practice, is difficult for the kind of work we do, but the collaborative efforts with our developers to improve testing are a continual goal. Pairing in the federal workspace, especially in the days of COVID, is a challenge, specifically because we have remote people supporting work in secure facilities that are inaccessible to them because of proximity or procedure. Let's talk about that in further detail. So let's look at where we work. On the left here, you'll see the primary workspace for our development teams in Los Angeles, California. And on the right side, you'll see Tachyon's shared military office space. I'm only kidding, of course, but if you've ever worked in the federal sector, chances are you've experienced our Spartan accommodations. The various classified networks that Tachyon deploys applications to are only accessible from systems that live on US military bases. With our developers unable to run the deployment automation themselves, Tachyon's on-site team steps into an operations role, facilitating deployment of applications to SIPRNet, the last leg of our path to production. Our platform team routinely pairs with our developers to solve problems, but on-site engineers aren't able to screen share from systems on a classified network, which can slow down collaboration and troubleshooting. Efforts are underway to embed a cleared engineer on every one of our development teams to empower them to run Tachyon's automation from a SIPR terminal. In the meantime, Tachyon maintains a steady operational workload. It's worth mentioning that COVID-19 has reduced the amount of engineers we're able to have on site. So some of these Tachyon team members join the remote work team 1 to 2 days a week. So our platform team has a split focus: remote site engineering and on-site operations. Because we support our developers in both cloud and on-premise environments, our path to production begins with building automation to integrate and deploy new releases to an unclassified cloud platform. The work begins with our remote team, and it's brought over to our on-site team for integration into a classified on-premise production environment known as SIPRNet. This on-site team provides monitoring and incident response for the whole Section 31 application portfolio. Tachyon also collectively takes responsibility for the maintenance and patching of our platform, configuring existing resources, and adding new capabilities as our developers request them. Finally, our team's project managers keep the team tasked with work that supports a roadmap of core objectives. They interface with project stakeholders and ensure that our work is always driven by our users' needs. So let's talk about app deployments. Tachyon's path to production begins in our unclassified platform running in Azure. Our development teams push their own applications here and collaborate with our cybersecurity team in building new features. While this occurs, Tachyon deploys to an unclassified on-site environment that serves as a kind of sandbox for new app and platform features. Once a new app release has been fully vetted by our cybersecurity team, it receives approval to be deployed to production. Now, you undoubtedly notice the images here of a strange artifact, something the ancients used to call CDs. Yes, I can hear your shock through the mute button. Our deployment process incorporates burning physical disks to deploy software to classified networks. This air gap policy has persisted longer than I have personally been alive, and it even predates compact disks. We believe, however, that Section 31's efforts to build a truly modern software factory are rapidly eroding the need for such antiquated safeguards. The day is fast approaching when physical media can be replaced by cross-domain services that encrypt data in transit, a key part of moving data from unclassified to classified systems. So we utilize automation to deploy our platform as a service with multiple cloud infrastructure providers, and we leverage Terraform to automate the creation of that cloud infrastructure. The Tanzu application service works together with Concourse to run our pipelines, which deploy not only applications, but also security patches and new products to the platform. Our automation is written to deploy to our on-premise environments as well. Here, the infrastructure is run by vSphere and is also deployed using the same Terraform scripting. Deploying to multiple infrastructures means that maintaining parity between every environment's automation is an ever-present challenge. I'm now going to turn it back over to Dan to talk about how the Tanzu application service helps us meet our mission goals.
All right, thanks, Matt. So let's talk about exactly that. So Cloud Foundry, again, is an accredited and trusted software product that gives us the ability to push applications as well as new services and backend capabilities to production in record time. In the federal space, record time could still be weeks or maybe even months. But if you compare and contrast that against maybe some of our other partner teams for the same capability, like MinIO as an example, those folks are well within months, if not even longer, to get the same capability pushed for their application developers. Moving forward, our team is relatively small. We have roughly a 2-pizza team, 5-6 people, and they're doing pretty well, but we can scale, way past the number of foundations, apps, and users that we currently have. And in fact, if we grew the platform, 2, 3, 4 times over, we could probably keep the still steady 5 or 6 engineers on the platform to do care and feeding for that, drastically larger platform. One thing that we absolutely do not have time for is to babysit virtual machines. That's the last thing that we want to do. We don't have the will to do it. We don't have the time to do it. So luckily in Cloud Foundry, we have something called Bosch, which basically does that for us. It reduces that toil. It monitors, it keeps all the virtual machines up and running. If one goes down, the resurrector will bring it back up. And really everything just runs on autopilot. Speaking about like boring and kind of non-event things, that's kind of our regular patching that we do every month. One thing that we definitely do not do is we don't have IT weekends to do patching. We don't do it in the evenings. We don't do it after hours. We do it during regular scheduled days where applications and our warfighters are using the applications. Again, on a Tuesday or Wednesday, as an example. Our users don't notice or care. Our application teams don't notice and care. And that's exactly the way that we want, again, something as mundane as security patching to be. And the reason why we're able to do this is, again, through our pretty standard implementation against the reference architecture, again, with Pivotal Cloud Foundry. So we've deployed 3 availability zones across all the different foundations that we've deployed. And we've worked with our application teams to deploy multiple instances of their applications across those 3 AZs. And most of our backend services, especially the data services like MySQL and Rabbit, are all running some form of HA. And again, Bosch takes care of just doing all the patching on the virtual machines. We just click play on the pipelines that we build, and everything just runs. Most of our platform services, in fact, all of them that are baked into Cloud Foundry, are self-service. So these are things that our application users consume, things like MySQL, Rabbit, Spring Cloud Services, so on and so forth. And just like we hate opening up tickets with our partner infrastructure teams or with external teams that we don't really have any control over, we don't want to impute that same sort of annoyance or toil on our own application teams who are our customers. So all of those services are clearly available in a catalog. They're self-service. They instantiate the services they need for the applications that they're currently developing. And then we end up pushing it on the high side based on what Matt talked about. And we can talk about that in the Q&A if you'd like. And last, and probably most important, is that we don't necessarily have control over the underlying IaaS that we're deploying to. So Matt alluded to Azure. So that's an IL4 environment that we needed to move to quickly, and there wasn't really a lot of options at that level of certification. So we kind of backed into Azure. Azure actually has been, and Microsoft has been, a very good partner there. But you can imagine that we don't want our application teams to really understand any of the nuances across any of the IaaSes that we deploy to. So they develop in Azure, they push to production in like on-prem with vSphere and also AWS. And so they want the same platform experience across all of those IaaSes without really changing any code or really any toil whatsoever. And Cloud Foundry does a great job of that for us. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other federal challenges that we might not have spoken to before. So one is it's virtually impossible, at least in our experience, to get application teams, at least currently, to release their own code in production and support their own applications. And me having a commercial background, I'm absolutely used to that. I'm used to app teams developing their own stuff, they deploy their own stuff, and they support that as well in operations. Most of those people don't have security clearances, so that puts more pressure on our team to provide that service to them. And that basically just takes away cycles that otherwise we could be using to making the platform even better. And not even that, or just to kind of follow up on that, our platform, even our own engineers, not all of them have access to these disconnected secure networks. And so we even have remote people, like we talked about before, who can't even get into a production network to do something like deploying a new foundation or to do patching. So again, that puts a little bit more pressure on the team that do have clearances to do that work. And why one would say, why can't they do it? They have security clearances, but they can't really get read in. So this gets a little bit into how we have, flows that request outside of our program that could take weeks, months, or maybe even a year to get something relatively simple stood up. And this is just something that's completely out of our control from a federal perspective. Incident management, we can't really talk about it. So if there's something going on in operations, we can restore service relatively quickly, but what we can't do is really talk about them in unclassified form. So where that gets really, I would say, irritating or even counterproductive is that we have people that are really responsible for coming up with the ultimate, like, what's the problem resolution? Like, what's the long-term fix? And many of those folks, can't get the access that they need or the data they need to ultimately come up with that, that fix. And so that's just the way it is, at least in the federal space that we work with. And then finally, we love Cloud Foundry. We would use it as long as we could, but there is lingering pressure to get onto K8s or Kubernetes. And, there's just something that we got to deal with on the side. Our engineers are happy to go to either one. But again, this is just something that's just on our roadmap that we can talk about in the Q&A. So let's talk a little bit about our lessons learned and then wrap up the presentation. Managing our platform as a product has been huge. So it really gives the platform team the needed focus to deliver the capabilities that our application teams find most valuable. Engineers being engineers, they all have their pet projects that they like to work on, but really having that user-centered design and working with our app team partners to understand what's most valuable to them has really helped, driven their priorities and the backlog that we have to make sure that we're delivering the best thing in the moment. Being part of the software factory for Section 31, I think, has really accelerated our ability to actually drive that cloud native mindset. So a lot of the engineering that we do around cloud native is relatively straightforward. It's not easy, but it's relatively straightforward. But the harder of the two is actually working with customers to instill that cloud native mindset. And that arguably is a much more difficult job. So being part of a software factory where that culture is already instilled makes our job from an engineering perspective just so much easier. Healthy relationships are huge, and I would say especially with our partner cyber team. As you can imagine, in the federal sector, security is everything, like Matt talked about. Anecdotally, we've had bad relationships with the cyber team that has almost ground our ability to be productive to a halt. And conversely, we've had great relationships with cyber who have, accelerated our ability to move even faster. So my recommendation for anyone working in this space is that make friends with your cyber folks, take them out for beers, move them left into the process so that you can instill sort of those security requirements early on so that you don't have any surprises when you're about to release to production. Like I mentioned before, don't assume that any cross-agency or department processes will be fast. We have, and really DD 254, I'm kind of talking to you, like we have people that we want to get read in and being productive at remote locations, and we can't do it because there's some piece of paper sitting on someone's desk. And there's really nothing we can do about it. So these are the kind of things that as a product manager, I just need to bake in as a risk. And then finally, my recommendation, when you're working with these teams, you're going to be working with processes that, again, will be annoying at best and just mind-numbing at worst and frustratingly inefficient. So instead of trying to optimize those processes in the beginning, my recommendation is to follow the happy path process as it's been defined to you by them. Get your actual work done, and then really what this establishes is trust with that team, so that down the road you have a much better ability to optimize those processes as you can. So I'm going to wrap up the presentation here and just say, can a Fed program like ours, or maybe like yours, behave like and get the same outcomes as a commercial cloud native shop? We believe you can. We've proven it, but you just have to pay attention to and kind of embrace the unique challenges that the federal sector brings. Thank you, and this wraps up the presentation. Enjoy your remaining time at SIPRNet.
Thanks, Dan and Matt. So everyone, head over to the Slack channel for the Q&A. There's a specific one for the Slack, and then you can see it there. Thanks, everyone.